Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Path of Exile 2's 0.2.0 Dawn of the Hunt expansion is coming in about a week's time. Grinding Gear Games have been putting out teasers, and one of the teasers that they put out to very little fanfare has the potential to be the best support gem in the game, albeit one that doesn't work for every build. This is Cadence support, something that will give the right attack-based builds 60% more attack speed. That's right, 60% more attack speed once they're rolling. This video is based upon an article that I wrote for the gaming strategy site Mobalytics, who I partner with. I'll put a link to that down in the description below. Now, that article is going to be more updatable than the YouTube video. Unfortunately, for fairly good reasons involving various bad actors like 4chan in the past, YouTube have made it so that you can't modify a video after it's been uploaded, or you can cut sections out, but you can't add a new section to it. There's good reasons for that, but unfortunately it does cause a lot of problems. Whereas the Mobalytics write-up, if it turns out that Grinding Gear Games announced tomorrow that our Cadence actually, the numbers were a bit too high and we're pulling them back a little, or we're changing the 8 to a 7, or we're changing it to a 9, or any sorts of changes that they make to the gem, the article can change, the video can't. I want to start by saying that Cadence is extremely strong, but it is not going to work for every build. And it's really important to know about the breakpoint system, some of the complex mathematics that's involved with this gem, because there's some counterintuitive ways that attack speed scales in Path of Exile 2, and there's some very important breakpoints as a result. If your attack speed is too high for Cadence, you'll end up getting disappointing results out of it. Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 both work on a server tick system, whereby cast speeds and attack times and the like, they can't just be any particular fraction of a second. There's certain fractions that they can be, and you get rounded up to the next server tick. So with Cadence, you want to keep that in mind, because that is something that can seriously undermine the amount of damage that you do if the server tick rounds the wrong way. And in fact, in some cases, using this support gem well is going to require you to do things like intentionally lowering your attack speed slightly, and then trust in the power of this support gem Cadence to return that to you in other ways. Now, the support gem itself, let's discuss the exact text that it uses. It supports attacks you use yourself, so no attacks that are made by proxies. Supported skills gain more attack speed each time that you use them, but will become unusable if used too frequently in a short time frame. Now, the version of this that was originally teased, it is plausible. This is pre-release. It's plausible that they might decide to nerf this before it goes live. But the version of it that was initially teased goes as follows. Supported skills have 10% more attack speed for each time that they have been used recently. However, supported skills become unusable for 10 seconds after being used 8 or more times within 4 seconds. Let's break that down. 8 or more times within 4 seconds. I know a lot of you are going, what's 4 divided by 8? That's a half. Okay, I need my attack speed to be slightly slower than once per 500 milliseconds. That is actually not the way that this works. You're going to want an attack speed that is slightly slower than that, and that is after you factor in all of the benefits that you can get from Cadence. Now let's start by talking about the basics. This is not a gem for ultra fast attacking builds. This is not a gem for ultra slow attacking builds. It's at its best when you're supporting a skill that is between the two extremes, and you want that skill to be the primary skill that you're using. So when it's great, if your attack speed is such that you don't quite reach 8 attacks per 4-second window, even with the speed boost from a fully charged up Cadence. Remember, if you're getting 7 attacks in every 4-second window, you've always had 6 attacks during that last 4 seconds, and as a result, you are going to be gaining 60% more attack speed. So in this scenario, 60% more attack speed on every single attack once you get rolling. You don't have this when you first engage a boss. You don't have this after you've just dodged out of the way of some deadly attack and then you've re-engaged. No, it's only when you're able to stand still, but when you're able to get going, you'll be getting 60% more attack speed on this particular skill. Now, there are also scenarios where this gem achieves absolutely nothing at all. This is on skills that you seldom use. This can be a skill that has a long cooldown, or it can be a skill that you just don't elect to use very much. A good example of both of those at the same time is Hammer of the Gods. Here, it's just not useful at all, because there's no circumstance where you're using this, but you've also used it within the last 4 seconds, because it's on a 24-second cooldown. Likewise, it also achieves nothing with certain mace skills that do not scale with attack speed at all. It's also actively awful sometimes. This is an actively awful support if you are naturally attacking more than 8 times in a 4-second window. In that case, you either need to actually slow down your attacks, or you're going to come into that 10-second lockout period. You end up banned from using your important skill, and that ban of 10 seconds is quite some long time. What benefit do you get if you intentionally overcharge Cadence like this? Now, the general speed boost that you're going to gain averages out to about 31%. It's not derisory to get 31% more attack speed on a gem. It's not fantastic, but it's not derisory either. The problem though is that you can only do this once every 10 seconds, and you're also unlikely to precisely recognize when the lockout starts, and so it's likely that you're going to end up wasting a bit of time after that lockout starts. The reason it's 31%, because you might think it's 35%, you've got one attack at 0, one at 10% more, one at 20% more, and so on up to 70%. But the one that you execute at 0% more speed, this one actually takes longer than the one that you execute at 70% more speed. And that's the reason that the average ends up only being 31% more speed rather than 35%. So it's kind of okay. The problem is that you're going to get caught off guard by this lockout coming in, and that's the problem with it. What about for players who are willing to go to extreme lengths to micromanage their gameplay in order to boost their DPS? Consider this scenario. Your attack speed is such that you just slightly exceed 8 attacks in every 4-second window, and that's once you've got the full bonus from Cadence rolling in. At this point, you've got the option of spending perhaps 90, 95, 97% of your time attacking, and then a small amount of time either repositioning or just doing something else. In this scenario, Cadence is extremely strong, but if you make a small mistake, you're going to be severely punished for it. The level of precision that's required here will be distracting, and splitting your focus like this is probably going to result in you making other play mistakes. I know that I certainly would be making a lot of other mistakes, like I'd be not paying attention to various boss moves if I'm paying attention to precise timing at that level. If you're determined to attempt this playstyle, I'd recommend that you use a tool to do it, a musician's metronome. Now you can either use an actual physical metronome like musicians tend to use, or one of the various mobile apps that will mimic that, and will just issue some sort of beep once every second, or at an exactly programmed time. You probably do want it ticking exactly once a second, and then every 4th time it ticks, you want to then take your finger off the attack button for a short period of time. Once more, I don't really recommend this playstyle. I don't think I'd be able to execute it flawlessly, but if you can, then fantastic. In most cases, if you do this, you're going to want to take your finger off the button for about 1/10 of a second, and there'll be a little bit more on that in a sec. So in order to optimize Cadence, you want to be in a situation where you're never hitting 8 attacks in 4 seconds, but you're coming very, very close to it. Now you could do the mathematics on this and you'll come to the conclusion that it is 4/7 of a second is where you need to be. However, there's actually a little bit of a mistake in there, and that is because of a nuance of the way that Path of Exile 2 works. This is the concept of server ticks. Basically, things can only happen on 33 millisecond intervals, approximately 1/30th of a second. If you mouse over a skill in game, it'll tell you how long it will take you to execute that attack or execute that spell. However, this in practice gets rounded up to the next multiple of 33 milliseconds because of the way that the game is programmed. Attacks can only take place on these server ticks, and they've been measured at about 33 milliseconds each. So if an attack is listed as taking 0.32 seconds, the first time you use it is at time is 0, then the next attack will not be at 0.32 seconds, it'll be at 0.33. That'll be 10 server ticks later. If your attack time was 0.34 seconds, then it will be at 0.363 instead. That'll be rounded up to be 11 server ticks instead. So if your attack speed ends up being 17 server ticks apart, here's the way that it ends up working. Your first attack comes in at 0 time. Your second one, 561 milliseconds. Your third, 1122 milliseconds. And so on up to your 8th, which is going to be 3927 milliseconds. So if your attacks are 17 server ticks apart, then you're going to end up triggering Cadence's lockout. However, if your attacks are 18 server ticks apart, then your 8th one is going to be pushed off into the future, and it's not going to be inside that 4-second window. In short, to optimize Cadence, what you want is that after factoring in a 60% more attack speed bonus from Cadence, you want your attack speed to be 18 server ticks. So this means that your ideal attack duration is more than 0.561 seconds and no more than 0.594 seconds. And this is with the 60% more attack speed bonus from Cadence. So if Cadence wasn't present, your attack speed would be between 0.899 seconds and 0.950 seconds. If you can get it exactly there, then Cadence is going to be absolutely phenomenal for you. It will be the best support gem in the game. Now, there are ways that you can tightly control your attack speed. If it turns out that you're off by just a smidgen, and this is much easier to do in Trade League than it is in Solo Self-Found, you can look for an emerald that has 2%, 3%, or 4% increased attack speed on it. Now, attack speed is normally a good stat on attack builds, and usually the more of it, the better. But if you find that you are only just under that 18 server tick threshold, then what you're going to want to do is actually nerf the amount of attack speed that you're getting on your jewels. That way, if you pull back from a 4% emerald to a 3% emerald, or a 3% to a 2, or a 2% emerald to using an emerald that doesn't have attack speed on it at all, then this will be something that can then potentially get you over that 0.562 threshold, so that you end up taking 18 server ticks between your attacks, and you can dodge that horrible Metronome playstyle. Now, normally this sort of tight min-maxing isn't worthwhile, but because Cadence is such a strong support gem, I actually think in this case, it is. There is, however, one more thing you've got to be very, very, very aware of, and that is the potential for acceleration shrines to mess you up. If you tap an acceleration shrine, you might do it to deny access to the buff to enemies, you might do it just by mistake or misidentifying which type of shrine it is, then you'll find yourself in a situation where your cadence can be overloaded, and you can get into that really awkward spot of experiencing that 10-second lockout on your most important skill while you are surrounded by monsters. You definitely don't want this, so if you do accidentally tap one of these acceleration shrines, then you can right-click the shrine buff to remove it. That's going to feel bad because acceleration shrines feel really good to use, just the extra movement speed they give you alone is great, but you're probably going to need to do that. There's other mechanics that might increase your attack speed as well, but the one that I think you're most likely to come across without speccing into it is the acceleration shrine. Anyways, that's my thoughts on Cadence support. There's a lot of fiddly stuff with those breakpoints, but the really important thing is knowing about that 0.899 to 0.950 second sweet spot and getting your attack speed into that when Cadence is not active. If you can do that, then you'll never overload Cadence without an external buff like an acceleration shrine, and you can just sit there and use it without having to worry about any fiddly stuff involving metronomes or anything along those lines. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.